All right, so nothing demo-wise happened much during this work session, but we went from going down a path that would probably lead in destruction into something that I think it's going in the right direction. I'm pretty happy with it. There are some things that are to come that still leave some question marks, but in general, I think it's mostly going the right way. So, kind of a slow start. As you can see, the first little bit, I'm just kind of wrestling with what to do, where to go. I had this kind of war with switch cases where I was like, first off, I was like, hey, switch case is going to be great for this. I just turn everything to like this state machine thing. Like everything's an enum state, and then we just jump between different ones and have transitions between all of them. And then I was thinking about it more. I'm like, okay, the times I've done that, I really haven't been too happy with it. Because it gets me to stop systemizing things, and it gets me to try to just box everything in like that. And when you box everything in like that, you lose out on some of this really cool interplay you can have with your code, where these different systems are all kind of colliding, or not colliding. Colliding is pretty destructive. They're kind of weaved together in a way where you get these really cool, beautiful, complex outcomes that are managed well. So I went down a rabbit hole. I was trying to find a way, like, is there some way I can, like, kind of get something like a switch case, but not? Trying to find, like, the right balance of, like, syntax to file structure to how the code is connected. And I think the best thing I found from this whole rabbit hole dive was, we'll get to it in a second. Well, actually wait till it shows up, then I'll bring it up. But ultimately what I ended up finding out is, hey, the switch case is actually pretty good, but it should be used to benefit or to, you need to use it in the right sort of, you need to use it when you need to use it, which is kind of obvious in hindsight. Before, the best example I can give is like before I was like, oh, there's like this glove state, right? It can be in these different cursor modes or just modes in general, right? And they're all discrete and yeah. And then I have to kind of figure out, there might be some ones that are blends of different ones, and I have to figure out what I would call those, and then blah, blah, blah. And then as you can see there, I was like, oh, crap, like, we can use a switch case. It just needs to be like for something that actually can benefit from a switch case. And that is, okay, if I systemize, here, a little bit of background info. You're able to grab different things. In this case, there's like 2 right now. They can grab on the glove, and if you grab those, you get different behaviors. If I just make that the thing that is grabbed, like the enum, and then make that a switch case, then all of a sudden it's not as big of a deal, because I don't need to like really like deliberate over like, oh, what would I call this state? It's like, no, it's just, there's like 2 or 3, maybe more things I can grab. Which of them am I grabbing right now? It's very much a system-driven thing based on like that interaction. And because this is a very interaction-driven part of the code, it's best to have that front and center. Yeah, and also having it done this way, there's not as much code packed into the switch case. Most of it can be outside of it. Because based on what you grab, it's going to change the behavior, but it's just changing. It's just shifting it. It's not doing like an entirely different thing that it needs its own space for. It just needs like, just a small change in behavior. And so it's only going to take a couple lines of code. And And it really, I think this is probably the first time I've used a switch case that I'm happy with how it's being used. I've used it wrong so many different times. Yeah, and another thing I was running into is like if we're really kind of packing these different degrees of freedom into the glove itself, then using that kind of, well, paradigm might be the wrong word, but what's it called? Structure, orientation. I don't, close enough. I had a whole, you can see the top, spatial cursor, like class, parent class. The whole time I was using it, I definitely kept running into things. I was like, I don't know if I'm happy with how this is working. And so I started bringing over some of the code, because we're getting 3 cursors out of basically 1. And so for that part to be like so orphaned from this part of the code felt very strange. So I took it out, and you can see me hopping back and forth. Yeah, I'm just bringing that system in right there, and I'm converting it to fit within this class. And you can see how much it improved. You can see that the spatial cursor one is just, it's pretty dense. There's a lot of references that are redundant, that are already handled in the glove itself. Also, the default behavior, which is very, like, painfully straightforward, was definitely not before, and now it is. So it's nice to have it be working in that way, because you want the complexity to kind of build linearly. You don't want the like huge pockets of complexity that pop out of nowhere, especially if you then do something smaller on top. It seems weird. No, it seems weird is not. I do fall back on the term weird quite a bit. To the point where we're like, what does weird even mean? A better way to describe it is anyone who codes has some degree in taste and more words that would customize it or personalize it to individuals. But there's like an aesthetic, which seems like a bit flowery, but it's very real, with how you maintain and build out your code. Because ultimately, coding can be a huge house of cards. So if you don't have, I'm trying to land on a better word than aesthetic. And the other one was like sanitation or like sanitary, like some sort of system where you keep things clean. But that doesn't really describe what I mean. But just through experience, I know when I'm going down a path that's going to lead to a bad spot. And bad spot is, spaghetti code, or code where I end up in a spot where, like, okay, I do have the base feature. I do have the base feature, but it's set up in a way where we want to iterate on it, we want to build off of on it, we want to make this design happen, and I just can't. It's built in a way where I can't really get it to do that thing, because it's already a mess. Like, if I try to do anything to it, it's not going to happen. And that's a really terrible position to be in, especially when you're working on things that are new and they're changing, and you want to be able to be flexible with that. And particularly when, just with that. Yeah. So I went from being like mid refactor, not having something testable, errors in all my different files and classes, to rounding out at the end with only just a handful, couple lines of errors in the main class, and with a good direction.